You didn't know. Behind those polished dinner parties, clever one-liners, and soothing radio advice, there's a whole other story hiding in plain sight. One filled with strange casting decisions, unusual acting methods, unexpected rivalries, and moments so bizarre, you'd think they were written as jokes. From actors who almost changed the entire show, to behind-the-scenes tricks that made everything look perfect, to details so weird you'll never watch the same way again. Frasier isn't just smart comedy, it's quietly chaotic. So, pour yourself a cup of coffee, adjust that designer couch, and try not to let Eddie stare too long. Because here are 20 weird facts about Frasier you probably didn't know. 20. Café Nervosa became iconic. When people talk about weird but unforgettable things in Frasier, Café Nervosa always comes up, and honestly, it deserves the spotlight. This wasn't just a random coffee shop set thrown together for convenience. It quietly became one of the most recognizable locations in television history, even though it looks so simple at first glance. That's what makes it a little strange. No flashy design, no over-the-top gimmicks, just a cozy cafe with a few tables, yet it somehow feels like the center of the entire show. Now here's the interesting part. Café Nervosa was never meant to compete with the bar from Cheers. The creators didn't want another loud, crowded hangout. Instead, they went in the opposite direction. They built a calm, intellectual space where characters could sit, sip coffee, and have long, witty conversations. That quiet setting actually made the jokes land better. Every sarcastic comment, or every awkward pause, every clever line, it all stood out more because of how relaxed the environment was. The cafe also reflected Frasier and Niles perfectly. Their love for expensive coffee and refined taste turned even simple coffee orders into dramatic moments. Something as basic as ordering a cappuccino could turn into a full-blown comedy scene. And over time, viewers started associating that cafe with comfort, routine, and sharp humor. What's really fascinating is how such a low-key location became so powerful. No loud music, no chaos, just conversations. Yet it became just as iconic as any bar, apartment, or office in TV history. That quiet charm is exactly what made Café Nervosa so weirdly unforgettable. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more amazing TV secrets like this. 19. The show avoided typical sitcom humor. One of the weirdest things about Frasier is how it completely ignored the usual sitcom formula and still became a massive hit. At a time when most shows relied on loud jokes, physical comedy, and predictable punchlines, Frasier went in a totally different direction. It leaned heavily into intelligent humor, subtle sarcasm, and layered dialogue. And honestly, that was a risky move. Instead of characters slipping, falling, or yelling for laughs, the show focused on conversations. Long, detailed, and sometimes very sophisticated conversations. The humor often came from misunderstandings, wordplay, or the characters' personalities clashing in clever ways. For example, Frasier and Niles could turn a simple dinner plan into a full-blown comedic situation just through their overthinking and dramatic reactions. This style made the show feel more mature and refined compared to other sitcoms of its time. But it also meant the writers had to work much harder. Every joke had to be smart, well-timed, and natural. There was no hiding behind cheap laughs, and surprisingly, audiences loved it. The show proved that comedy doesn't have to be loud to be funny. Even today, this approach feels fresh. While many sitcoms age quickly, Frasier still holds up because its humor is based on human behavior rather than trends. That's what makes it so unusual, and honestly, kind of impressive. It broke the rules and still came out on top. 18. John Mahoney was actually British. Here's something that feels almost unbelievable when you first hear it. John Mahoney, who played the down-to-earth, all-American dad, Martin Crane, wasn't American at all. He was actually born in England. And the strange part? Most viewers never noticed. Mahoney's performance was so natural, so convincing, that it's hard to imagine anyone else in the role. His accent, his mannerisms, even his attitude, everything about Martin felt authentically American. He played a retired police officer with such ease that people assumed it came naturally to him. But behind the scenes, it was all carefully crafted. Before acting, Mahoney moved to the United States and spent years adapting to American culture. By the time he joined Frasier, he had completely mastered the accent. Still, it's fascinating to think that the most regular and grounded character on the show was played by someone who originally came from a completely different background. This contrast actually adds another layer to the show. Martin was meant to represent simplicity and realism, especially compared to Frasier and Niles' sophisticated lifestyles. Knowing that the actor behind him had to work so hard to create that natural feel makes his performance even more impressive. It's one of those behind-the-scenes details that feels strange once you know it, but also makes you appreciate the show even more. 17. Jane leaves. Adjusted her accent. At first listen, Daphne Moon's voice sounds perfectly British, but here's the weird twist. Jane Leaves actually had to adjust her real accent to play the role. That might sound odd, considering she's from England. But her natural way of speaking didn't quite match what the show needed. The character of Daphne was written with a very specific kind of Northern English accent, something distinct, warm, and slightly quirky. Jane Leaves, however, naturally spoke with a different tone, so instead of just using her real voice, she had to modify it to better fit the character. In a way, she was acting even when it came to how she spoke. This added a unique charm to Daphne. Her voice became one of her most recognizable traits, helping her stand out in almost every scene. Whether she was telling one of her unusual psychic stories or reacting to the Crane brothers' behavior, her accent made everything feel more memorable. What's even more interesting is that most viewers had no idea. The accent sounded so natural that it never felt forced or artificial. And that's the mark of a great performance, when even the details that require effort seem completely effortless. It's a small thing on the surface, but once you realize it, it adds another layer of appreciation for the character. Sometimes, even authenticity needs a little adjustment to feel just right. 16. The apartment was extremely expensive. Frasier's apartment isn't just a place where scenes happen, it's actually one of the most carefully designed and strangely extravagant sets in sitcom history. In Frasier, the apartment was built to look like it belonged to someone with elite taste, and the level of detail is honestly surprising. The set designers didn't just throw in random fancy furniture. They selected pieces inspired by real high-end designs, rare decor, and expensive art styles. And everything, from the couch to the lighting, was chosen to reflect Frasier's personality. Sophisticated, cultured, and maybe just a little bit over the top. It's been estimated that the apartment's look represented a value of around $500,000. That's a huge number, especially for a sitcom set. And the reason behind it makes things even more interesting. The producers wanted a strong visual contrast between Frasier's refined lifestyle and Martin's simple, practical taste. That's why Martin's old chair stands out so much. In the middle of all that elegance, it looks completely out of place, and that's exactly the point. The apartment itself becomes part of the storytelling. It's not just background, it reflects the characters and their differences. What makes it weird is how much thought went into something viewers might not consciously notice. But once you do notice it, you realize the set is quietly doing a lot of work. It's one of those hidden details that makes the show feel richer without ever saying a word. 15. Martin was supposed to be dead. Here's one of those weird continuity moments that longtime fans of Frasier still talk about. Before Frasier even began, the character of Frasier Crane appeared in Cheers. And at one point in that earlier show, Frasier clearly mentioned that his father was dead. Simple, straightforward, and completely contradicted later. When Frasier started, suddenly Martin Crane was alive, well, and living with his son. Played brilliantly by John Mahoney, Martin became one of the most important characters in the entire series. So what happened? Instead of ignoring the mistake, the writers came up with a clever explanation. They suggested that Frasier had lied about his father being dead during Cheers, possibly out of frustration or embarrassment. It's not something the show heavily focuses on, but it quietly fixes the inconsistency. What makes this so interesting is how easily audiences accepted it. In many shows, a continuity error like this would feel jarring, but Frasier handled it so smoothly that most viewers didn't even question it. Martin quickly became such a lovable and essential character that the earlier detail just faded into the background. It's a perfect example of how strong writing and great performances can turn even a clear contradiction into something believable. Instead of breaking the story, it actually adds a strange little layer to Frasier's past. 14. Celebrity callers literally phoned it in. One of the most unique and slightly weird features of Frasier was the use of celebrity callers on Frasier's radio show. These weren't just random voices either. They were big-name stars like Kevin Bacon, Halle Berry, and Stephen King. But here's the twist. Many of them didn't even step onto the set. Instead of recording in the studio with the cast, they often sent in their lines remotely. In the most literal sense, they phoned it in. This was pretty unusual at the time, especially for a major TV show. Despite that, the scenes still worked perfectly. The callers felt real, the conversations flowed naturally, and nothing seemed out of place. That's partly because the show's format made it believable. Since Frasier was hosting a radio program, it made sense for callers to be heard, but not seen. This approach also allowed the show to bring in a huge variety of guest voices without dealing with complicated schedules. Big celebrities could participate without needing to travel or spend long hours filming. It was simple, efficient, and surprisingly effective. What's fascinating is how something so minimal, just a voice over the phone, added so much charm to the show. It gave each episode a fresh feel while keeping the focus on dialogue and character interaction. 13. The show won. 37. Emmy Awards. Winning awards isn't unusual for a great show, but Frasier took things to another level entirely. Over its run, the series collected an incredible 37 Primetime Emmy Awards. That's not just impressive, it's record-breaking. For years, Frasier held the title for the most Emmy wins by a scripted series. And it didn't just win once or twice, it dominated. The show even took home the award for Outstanding Comedy Series 5 years in a row, which is extremely rare. What makes this even more interesting is the kind of show Frasier was. It wasn't loud or flashy. It didn't rely on big action or dramatic twists. Instead, it focused on smart writing, strong performances, and subtle humor. Yet somehow, that quiet approach stood out enough to earn massive recognition. Actors like Kelsey Grammer and David Hyde Pierce also received individual awards, showing just how strong the cast was. Every part of the show, from writing to acting, was consistently praised. Eventually, other shows would surpass its record, but the impact remained. Those awards weren't just numbers, they reflected how unique and well-crafted the series truly was. 12. You have the Space Needle. Kept disappearing. Since Frasier is set in Seattle, you'd expect one famous landmark to always be visible: the Space Needle. And for the most part, it is. But here's where things get a little strange. If you pay close attention throughout the series, you'll notice something odd. The Space Needle doesn't always stay in the same place. In some episodes, it's clearly visible in the background skyline. In others, it's missing completely. And sometimes it even appears in slightly different positions. This wasn't intentional storytelling. It was a result of changing set backdrops. The skyline seen through Frasier's apartment window wasn't real. It was a carefully designed background that got updated or altered over time. Small changes during production led to these inconsistencies. What's interesting is how few people noticed it during the original run. The show's focus on dialogue and character interactions kept viewers engaged, so details in the background often went unnoticed. But once you spot it, it's hard to ignore. The disappearing landmark becomes a fun little mystery in the background of the show. It's a reminder that even in a carefully produced series, small quirks can slip through, and sometimes they make the experience even more enjoyable. 11. Frasier was played for 20 years. It's rare for an actor to play the same character for a long time, but what Kelsey Grammer did with Frasier Crane is on a completely different level. He didn't just play the role for a few seasons. He lived with it for 2 full decades, and that's what makes this fact so unusual. The journey started on Cheers, where Frasier was introduced as a supporting character. At the time, no one expected him to become such a big part of television history. But audiences connected with him, and the character kept growing. Then came Frasier, where he finally took center stage. From the mid-1980s all the way to the early 2000s, Grammer continuously portrayed the same character without a break. That kind of consistency is incredibly rare in television. Most actors move on, roles change, shows end, but Frasier Crane just kept going. What's even more impressive is how the character evolved. He wasn't stuck in one version of himself. Viewers got to see different sides of him: his career struggles, his relationships, his growth as a person. And through it all, Grammer kept the performance fresh and believable. It's one of those achievements that doesn't get talked about enough, but once you realize it, it feels pretty remarkable. Playing a character for that long without losing its charm is no easy task, and it's a big part of why Frasier became so iconic. 10. Sardine oil was used for dog scenes. Some of the funniest and most natural moments in Frasier involve Eddie the dog showing affection toward the characters. But here's the weird behind-the-scenes trick. Those sweet, playful interactions weren't always as natural as they looked. To get Eddie to kiss or focus on the actors, the crew used simple but clever methods. They would apply sardine oil or even liver pâté on the actors' faces or just behind their ears. The smell would attract the dog, making it look like he was being affectionate on camera. It sounds a bit strange, and honestly, it is, but it worked perfectly. The result was believable, funny, and sometimes even adorable. Viewers saw a charming bond between Eddie and the characters without realizing the small tricks happening behind the scenes. This technique is actually common in productions involving animals, but in Frasier it became especially noticeable because Eddie had such a strong presence. He wasn't just a background pet, he was a scene stealer. What makes this fact stand out is how something so simple created such memorable moments. A little bit of sardine oil turned into television magic, proving that even the smallest tricks can have a big impact on how a scene feels. 9. Moose and his son didn't get along. Eddie the dog may have looked calm and lovable on screen, but behind the scenes, things were a bit more complicated. Moose, the original dog who played Eddie, was later replaced by his son, Enzo. Sounds smooth, right? Well, not exactly. Here's the weird part. Moose and Enzo didn't get along at all. Despite being father and son, they couldn't even be in the same room together without causing problems. That created a unique challenge for the production team. To manage this, the crew had to carefully schedule their time on set. Moose and Enzo were never allowed to overlap. One would finish filming completely before the other was brought in. It required strict planning and coordination just to keep everything running smoothly. What makes this even more interesting is how seamless it looked on screen. Viewers never noticed the switch. Eddie remained the same clever, expressive dog throughout the series, even though 2 different animals played the role. It's one of those behind-the-scenes realities that feels almost ironic. On screen, Eddie seemed perfectly behaved and consistent. Off screen, there were strict rules just to keep things under control. This hidden tension adds another layer to the show's production. It reminds you that even the simplest roles can come with unexpected challenges. 8. The dog refused to bond with the cast. You'd think that a dog working closely with actors for years would naturally bond with them. But in Frasier, that wasn't really the case. Moose, the dog who played Eddie, kept things strictly professional, and that's what makes this detail so unusual. Instead of becoming attached to the cast, Moose mainly bonded with his trainer. Off camera, he didn't show much interest in the actors at all. No playful interactions. No emotional connection. Just focus on the job. Actors like John Mahoney understood this and treated him more like a coworker than a pet. They respected the boundaries and worked with him in a calm, controlled way during scenes. What's surprising is how different this feels compared to what we see on screen. Eddie often appears curious, engaged, and sometimes even mischievous around the characters. It creates the illusion of a strong connection. But behind the scenes, everything was carefully managed. This actually shows how skilled the training and direction were. Even without a natural bond, Moose delivered consistent and memorable performances. Every look, every reaction, every perfectly timed moment, it all came from discipline rather than emotion. It's a strange contrast, but also a fascinating one. Sometimes, on what looks like genuine chemistry is really just great training and smart filmmaking working together. 7. Eddie got more fan mail than the cast. Here's a weird one that even surprised the people working on Frasier. Eddie the dog didn't just steal scenes, he stole the audience too. In fact, Moose, the Jack Russell Terrier who played Eddie, received more fan mail than any of the human cast members. Yes, even more than Kelsey Grammer. It sounds almost unbelievable, but it actually happened. Viewers were completely fascinated by Eddie's expressions, his timing, and especially those silent staring contests with Frasier. He didn't even need dialogue to make people laugh. Just a look was enough. At one point, Moose became so popular that he even appeared solo on the cover of a major entertainment magazine. And that's something very few animal actors ever achieve. He wasn't just part of the show anymore. He became a celebrity in his own right. Of course, this level of attention didn't go unnoticed on set. There were moments of lighthearted jealousy, especially since Eddie's role was technically much smaller. Still, it added a fun dynamic behind the scenes. What makes this fact so interesting is how unusual it is. In most shows, human stars dominate the spotlight, but here, a dog managed to outshine everyone without saying a single word. That kind of popularity is rare, and it's a big reason why Eddie remains one of the most memorable parts of the series. 6. Niles was created by accident. Sometimes the best characters aren't planned at all, and Niles Crane is a perfect example of that. When Frasier was first being developed, there was no Niles in the original concept. The story was supposed to focus mainly on Frasier's new life. But everything changed when the creators came across David Hyde Pierce. They noticed something striking. He looked incredibly similar to Kelsey Grammer. That resemblance sparked an idea. What if Frasier had a brother who shared his personality traits? And just like that, Niles was born. What makes this even more fascinating is how quickly the character became essential to the show. Niles wasn't just an extra addition, he became one of the funniest and most beloved parts of the series. His nervous energy, precise mannerisms, and witty dialogue created a perfect contrast with Frasier. It's hard to imagine the show without him now, but originally he didn't exist at all. That's what makes this so weird. And a last-minute idea turned into one of the defining elements of the entire show. It just goes to show that sometimes the most memorable characters come from unexpected moments rather than careful planning. 5. Martin's chair was intentionally ugly. At first glance, Martin Crane's chair might seem like a random old piece of furniture. But in Frasier, that chair was anything but random. In fact, it was deliberately designed to look out of place, and that's what makes it so interesting. The production team went out of their way to create a chair that clashed with everything around it. They used old-fashioned fabric inspired by the 1970s, with bold patterns that didn't match Frasier's elegant apartment at all. It wasn't meant to blend in, it was meant to stand out, and it worked perfectly. On Frasier's apartment was designed to look extremely expensive and sophisticated, filled with carefully chosen decor. Then, right in the middle of it, sits this worn-out, mismatched chair. The contrast instantly tells you something about the characters. Frasier values style and luxury, while Martin values comfort and practicality. The chair became more than just furniture. It became a symbol of their differences. It even turned into a recurring joke throughout the series, with Frasier constantly trying to get rid of it, and Martin refusing. What makes this detail so weird is how much thought went into something so simple. A single chair added depth, humor, and conflict to the show without needing any explanation. 4. The theme song has a hidden meaning. That catchy theme song from Frasier might sound playful and random at first, but there's actually a clever meaning hidden behind it. Toss salads and scrambled eggs isn't just a quirky phrase. It's a metaphor. The song was written and performed by Kelsey Grammer, and he had to follow a very specific rule. The creators didn't want the lyrics to directly mention psychiatry, radio, or anything too obvious about the show's premise. So instead, they used creative wording. That's where the famous line comes in. Toss salads and scrambled eggs represents Frasier's patients, people who come to him confused, mixed up, and in need of guidance. It's a humorous and subtle way of describing the chaos he deals with every day. What's interesting is how well it works. Even if you don't know the meaning, the song still feels right. It matches the tone of the show, light, clever, and a little bit unusual. But once you understand the metaphor, it adds another layer of appreciation. The theme isn't just catchy, it's smart, just like the show itself. It's a small detail, but it perfectly captures what makes Frasier so unique. 3. Lisa Kudrow was fired before filming. It's hard to imagine now, but before Frasier even started filming, one major casting decision changed at the last moment. Lisa Kudrow was originally chosen to play Roz Doyle. Yes, the same Lisa Kudrow who later became a global star. But during the rehearsal week, things didn't quite click. The creators felt that her performance didn't match the strong, sharp, and confident personality they had in mind for Roz. It wasn't about talent, it was about fit. The character needed a certain bold energy, especially to stand up to Frasier's personality. So, in a surprising move, she was let go before filming even began. That decision led to Perry Gilpin stepping into the role. And as it turned out, she was exactly what the show needed. Her confident delivery and natural chemistry with the cast made Roz one of the standout characters. What makes this story even more interesting is what happened next. Lisa Kudrow didn't fade away. She went on to star in Friends, becoming one of the most recognizable faces on television. It's one of those rare moments where a rejection leads to something even bigger. A casting change that seemed risky at the time ended up working perfectly for everyone involved. 2. Kelsey Grammer's Requisite Disrespect. Method. Behind the polished and intelligent world of Frasier, there was an acting method that felt a bit unusual. Kelsey Grammer followed something he called his requisite disrespect approach. Instead of rehearsing scenes over and over, he often practiced only once. Sometimes he didn't fully memorize his lines until the last moment. His goal was simple. He wanted every performance to feel fresh, natural, and spontaneous, rather than overly rehearsed. And in many ways, it worked. His delivery often felt effortless, as if the dialogue was happening in real time. That added a layer of realism to his character, making Frasier feel more genuine and less scripted. But this approach also had its downsides. Not everyone on set found it easy to work with. Co-stars and guest actors sometimes felt frustrated because they relied on more traditional preparation. The unpredictability could make scenes harder to plan. Still, it became part of what made his performance unique. That slight edge of spontaneity gave Frasier a distinct presence on screen. It's a strange mix, less rehearsal leading to stronger results. But somehow, in this case, the unconventional method helped create one of television's most memorable characters. 1. Eddie was a nightmare dog. Eddie may look like the perfect, well-behaved dog on screen, but the reality behind Frasier is completely different, and honestly, a bit shocking. Before becoming a star, Moose, the dog who played Eddie, was known for being extremely difficult. His behavior was far from calm. He would climb trees, destroy things around the house, and even attack a neighbor's cat. At one point, he was considered almost impossible to manage. Not exactly what you'd expect from a future television icon. That's when trainer Matilda Dangy stepped in. Instead of giving up on him, she worked patiently to channel his energy and teach him discipline. It wasn't an overnight transformation. It took time, effort, and consistent training to turn Moose into a focused and reliable performer. And the result? One of the most memorable animal characters in television history. On screen, Eddie appears perfectly timed, expressive, and incredibly well-behaved. Every stare, every reaction feels intentional. It's hard to believe that the same dog once had such chaotic behavior. What makes this story so fascinating is the transformation itself. From uncontrollable troublemaker to scene-stealing star, Moose's journey is as surprising as it is impressive. And there you have it. 20 weird facts about Frasier that prove this classy sitcom was hiding some seriously strange secrets behind all that sophistication. But now I've got to ask you, which one surprised you the most? Was it Eddie stealing the spotlight, the casting twists, or one of those behind-the-scenes tricks that completely changes how you see the show? Drop your answer in the comments. I'm curious to see what caught you off guard. And hey, if you enjoyed this and want more deep dives into your favorite shows, hit that subscribe button like Frasier reaching for the perfect sherry. Smooth, confident, and necessary. Stick around because, trust me, it only gets more interesting from here.